laws of metaphysics and theories of metaphysics. In the same way that the physical world has laws, for example, people know about the laws of motion, the law of gravity, you know, the water cycle, for example, where rain goes into the sea, gets heated by the sun, and turns into clouds and turns back into rain again. These can all be understood by the understanding of certain laws that affect them, certain energies that interact. So in the same way that there are physical laws and there are theories to help to understand or describe these physical laws, there are also metaphysical laws and theories in relation to these metaphysical laws as well. So the thing is that there can be real laws, as in those that relate to the physical world, and then there can be abstract laws, abstract as in those that relate to the metaphysical world. So it's difficult to explain something that you can't see or sense with your 5 physical senses. So that's the reason why we can use, or we can compare physical laws and theorems and draw parallels which can help us to understand or help us to conceptualize the abstract metaphysical laws. For example, if you say love is the universal law of metaphysics, that love is everything, what does that mean? Love is an abstract word, you know, where you can say you can eat an apple and fill your tummy or your, you know, your belly. Then an apple is a physical thing, and you know, it does certain physical things to you after you eat it. There's certain biochemical reactions that happen within your body. So in the same kind of way, how do we talk about love, for example, or any other energy? How do we understand, for example, when we meet a person and we feel very good about meeting that person, yet we can meet another person and we don't feel good about meeting that person? So there is some kind of a energy there, an energy exchange, or whatever you want to call this is the thing. What do we call that thing? That's where the law of metaphysics and the theories of metaphysics come into play. So in the same way that we have laws which start off with axioms, and then other laws are developed using those axioms. So love would be an axiom in this case, that love would then be used as a way of defining or conceptualizing other laws, and hence theories, to try and understand, you know, as much as we can, what's going on in the world around us. So for example, which is what I've said is very complicated. It's a very if you're not familiar with this kind of terminology, that would be very difficult to understand. So for example, if we define adding, we have 2 numbers. You have 1 plus 1, for example. So 1 add 1 is equal to 2. But that's also, and then from 1 plus 1 equals 2, there's ways in which you can add lots of things. So 10 lots of 1, rather than saying 1 plus 1 plus 1, etc. 10 times, you can say 1 times 10. So multiplication is a law which is based on addition. So understanding addition and then creating a law above that which makes addition easier is multiplication. And there's loads of other laws, but that's, you know, that's mathematics. So leave that, because it's can get very complex. Anyway, so the thing with 1 + 1 = 2 is that it's not always the case that 1 + 1 = 2. It depends, how do we define what the ones are. We said that the plus means the adding means putting the numbers together, but what is the first one and what is the second one? You see, for example, if you have an apple, you can have a small apple and you can have another apple that's like double the size. But then if we say 1 + 1 = 2, that is correct, that there are two apples. But then are you just talking about the physical objects of the two apples, or are you talking about their weight? Because in that case, you're not adding the same thing. So, you know, when you're using just numbers, there's a very rigid framework by which numbers are put together and used and so on and so forth. And the problem is that that rigid framework can actually make something appear to be logical, but the answer may be illogical from another perspective. So, for example, using 1 + 1 again, and you know, you've got the different size apples. They can represent different things. One can be an adult and like a male, and the other one can be female. And then, what do you exactly mean by 1 + 1? Then you see that's where that question comes in. So, even talking about something very simple, the logic that we use can make the laws and theorems that we come out with, you know, appear to be wrong based on certain perspectives and right based on other perspectives. And you know, so and on the other hand, you've also got the angle of the perspective of the abstract. How do you define things that you can't see? And, you know, do these things actually exist? So, sticking to logic for a minute, you know, there's a way in which logic can be wrong. And, for example, if you do a search on a search engine at the moment, you know, in the year 2015, you'll see that there are so many websites which talk about the center of the earth. The center of the earth is supposed to be an inner mantle, according to the normal scientific understanding. And so, you know, there's a huge fire or a nuclear explosion that's in the center of the earth that's supposed to be heating the earth. But if you actually use logic to try and work out whether that is true or not, then there's certain questions which come which seem to show that that's not the case. For example, the earth is supposed to be egg-shaped or like a squashed orange or something. And if there was an inner mantle, the north and south poles would be closer to the inner mantle, so there shouldn't be snow there. You see? And then if there was a huge inner mantle as you see on search engines, the seawater wouldn't be that cold. Most of the seawater would be warm, not just around the equator, where, you know, the earth is closest to the sun. And the same thing about the if you go to a desert, for example, and you see how hot a desert is, you know, certain areas of the planet which are closer to the inner mantle, which are not, you know, near the equator, should be just as hot as well, because of the heat of this nuclear explosion, or this apparent nuclear, you know, explosion or whatever is going on in the center of the planet. So, anyway, that's something to think about. So in the same way, there are theories which are already derived, for example, in terms of metaphysics that are put in some scriptures, but there may not be theories of metaphysics, and there may be other teachings or other ideas which were put together which are now taken as something that was sent by God as scripture. So, for example, in the old Hindu teachings, there's the theory about the 9 doors and the 10th gate, that the human body has 9 physical doors from which leak, which give off, whatever. And then there's a 10th door. The 10th door is supposed to be the eye of wisdom. The 9 physical doors are supposed to be the eyes, the ears, the 2 nostrils, the mouth, and the front bottom and the back bottom of the human. So the vagina or penis at the front, and the anus at the back, those are supposed to be the 9 doors, and they all, give off some kind of excrement, like, you get pus out of your eyes or your wax out of your ears and so on and so forth. But the problem is, what about the belly button? The belly button is a physical door. And if you actually go a step further, the belly button is a physical door that is open before birth and closed after birth. So there's all of these kind of, things that where we can look at, for example, the inner mantle theory. That theory can be rechecked and have to be redefined or reconceptualized. So in the same way, in other words, science is a progressive, physical science, that is a progressive subject, where one theory may come up in the future which shows a theory that was put forward in the past to be wrong or not wholly accurate, maybe slightly inaccurate. And that's the same with metaphysics as well. That's the reason why I've mentioned this. So anyway, so if we look at, for example, dogs and cats, they have what you could call senses which are beyond the scope of human senses. Dogs can hear things ultrasound, higher than the frequency of what humans can hear. And some people say that dogs can see ghosts and things like that. So looking just at senses, for example, we have, for example, there are radio waves all around me right now, but we can't see them. In a physical sense, we can't see them. The camera is showing only me. It's not like we're clouded by radio waves, but if I had a radio, I would be able to tune into a radio station. If someone was calling me on a mobile phone, that would be a digital signal that would be transmitted as a radio signal, and so on and so forth. So there are things that can exist which are beyond the scope of the physical senses. So that's another thing that we can look at. For example, if someone has a near-death experience, there are people that have had near-death experiences, or even in their sleep, they've had dreams where they've seen light, they've seen white light, for example, beings in white light, maybe angels, or beings who they thought were angels, and some people may have seen ghosts, or they feel that they have seen ghosts. So then we have to ask ourselves, did they actually experience these at the level of metaphysics, or what we call the sixth sense? Or are these because of some kind of drugs that they may have taken, magic mushrooms or something? That's the thing. You see, if you have someone who doesn't take these kind of things and they have these experiences, then there has to be another explanation for why they had these experiences. So the point that I wanted to make again was that there are certain laws of metaphysics and theories that can be derived from these laws. And for example, the law of sowing and reaping, also known as the law of karma, quote unquote karma, there are an infinite number of laws, or the law of infinity, that there are infinite ways in which things can happen, the law of duality, and so on and so forth.